Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in and joining us here. We are the Real Short Box. This is one of our very special gold standard interview editions, so thank you for tuning in for it. I'm Donald, and as always, my partner in crime, Mr. Kevin, is here with me. And we have two very wonderful special guests. Kevin, let's have you do the introductions. You always do so much better than me. You're always so much more excited and vocal about it, very physical with your introductions.
Well, first, yes, we have two special guests, two men who are part of the entertainment business. They have worked in Hollywood and television and film for well over 33 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Pat Peach and Mr. Dan Gross. Welcome to the Real Short Box, gentlemen.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate this and you taking the time. This is going to be a lot of fun, particularly because of some of the films that were produced by you two fine gentlemen. I know Kevin has one behind him. I have one behind me, which mine's a little more harder, I would say, to guess based on the picture I put up. but if you guess it, gold star. And then I do see a couple films there behind you gentlemen, and one of them is already caught my eye, Pat, very much right behind you. So we're definitely gonna dive into that.
You should, because Dan and I have something to do with that film.
Yeah, and I can't wait. I'm super stoked about that. I have a story about that film, and I can't wait for it.
More stories about that film than the other one.
Okay, good. Kevin, you had a question you wanted to know, kind of like the origin story. Am I correct?
Absolutely. We always ask our guests this question. So the first thing is, where are you gentlemen from?
Dan, you okay, I grew up in Washington, D.C., the suburbs of Maryland. I went to the Newhouse School at Syracuse University, which I'm very proud of, and studied film and television, and wormed my way more into the home video industry, which was big in the mid 80s.
Oh, yes.
I ended up it was a huge industry. If anyone young enough or old enough out there to remember video stores, when every block had a video store, there were 30,000 of them in the United States. And there was an entire industry of making what was called direct-to-video movies for the video stores. And I worked for a company called Cabin Fever Entertainment, and we made lots and lots of movies for the video stores.
Nice.
A moment of silence for the video stores. It's something I grew up with, and I miss the video stores.
It's never been the same. Netflix and Amazon do not recreate that experience.
The kids now, unfortunately, they just don't know. It's similar to the record store. You just don't know what it's like to actually go in and just dig in and just research, or just discover stuff on your own, rather than being force-fed something about an algorithm. You just go and discover a passion. You discover a movie or a record that you love. I miss that experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting because record stores are making a comeback, and you see a lot more now than you have in the last 20 years, which is great. I love it. And it's also interesting to find out that particularly, I think, because of the direct-to-video market, and because of platforms like Walmart's and stores like that, where you can still buy the physical disc, DVDs actually still outsell Blu-rays, which I found to be quite...
I'll never understand that.
Yeah, it boggles the mind. But I think a lot of that has to do with the direct-to-video market, as far as like a lot of lower budget productions only want to afford to put it on DVD, and then it gets out there and gets distributed, and that equates to more sales.
There's also licensing issues as well, unfortunately, when it comes to these things, like moving to formats.
That's
so
true.
I can tell you, I had to broadcast a clip on the air once, and I rented a VHS and I got the DVD and put them next to each other. The DVD looked worse than the VHS, materially worse, because of the compression on the video.
Yeah.
Right. That's true.
I remember when I was younger, I was like, I can't notice the difference between VHS and DVD. And yeah.
It was not progress. The sound was a lot better, but it was not really progress.
Yeah. A lot of the DVDs, especially the special features, I found those to be fantastic. The special feature that was my favorite was interactive menus. That's it. So you could click and select, and that was the special feature.
It was a novelty.
Yeah,
Well,
or the trailer.
You could watch the end again. You could watch each act again. You could bounce around.
Yeah, the replayability.
But there was something special about that old little sticker, be kind, rewind. Sometimes it was good to rewind a little bit and then just play again.
My mom used to put me on rewind duty. Like after we watched the films and stuff, I would go and rewind the tapes. And like we had a specific one. It was like an old classic car that you would shove the VHS tape in and push down, and it would rewind it for you. It was so you didn't ruin your VCR.
Okay, I'm a big thrift store guy. There are 20 VHS machines in every thrift store in the country. They are easy to buy for $5 to $10.
There we go.
Yeah, very, very true. I see them all the time.
And Pat, let me ask you, sir, where are you from?
I'm originally from Scottsdale, Phoenix, Scottsdale area. I grew up there. Steven Spielberg went to my high school.
That's right. Arizona. That's right. Him and J.J. Abrams. I think they were both from Arizona.
I went to Arizona State and then came out here and produced my first film when I was 23. And then
what year was that, Pat? When you came out?
I came out in 1976.
1976.
Yeah, I was 21, and then after producing that film, I worked on the most legendary one of the most legendary films ever called Roar, called The Most Dangerous.
Way.
Oh yeah, I was production coordinator.
Wow, that's insane.
It is.
I watched that just a couple years ago, and I think they showed it even at I think it was at the New Bev.
Yeah.
They had a print of it or something, and they showed it there.
You go to the screening where John Marshall was speaking at it?
I didn't, but my buddy did. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience, and I did that, and I worked on every single crew over the next, let's say, 5 or 10 years, maybe, and then started producing regularly after that. I worked for a lot of different companies. I would get rehired with a lot of different companies, and then one day I was really good friends with a guy who was a completion bond, movie insurance guys.
Yes. Very important.
You should explain more what a completion bond is, because it's material to these stories.
That's true. A lot of people don't know what it is.
Yeah. A completion bond is the basic insurance. They call it reinsurance. It's insurance to make sure the film gets finished. It's for investors and distributors, and they monitor the production and make sure on budget and schedule and everything. And you pay them a fee, and they kind of stay in your face to make sure you're taking care of it. And I had a really good reputation with them. And one of the guys moved from. He was a really cool guy. He's one of my. He loved me, and he would constantly recommend me for jobs. And then all of a sudden, he moved over to Miramax, and became head of production. And he brought me in, and the first film he brought me in on was Halloween H2O. And at the same time, almost within, I guess, months, he'd hired Dan and brought Dan out.
Okay. Real quick.
And I want to explain more in a minute of Pat being brought in as a Bond rep on that movie, because it was a little more covert than he's saying.
Oh no, I'm just saying. I'm just getting to the point at the start of the story, but that's where I met Dan for the first time.
Before we dive into that, I want to circle back to this Roar thing, because I have a feeling we're just going to keep going. And
by the way, you could just do a podcast on that.
I need to know a little more. And
stories that you won't believe.
Pat, we might have to. For those that don't know, the movie Roar was basically, it was filmed it was like a preserve for lions. Am I correct?
No. The Noel Marshall and his wife Tippi Hedren had been raising lions in their house in Encino, and once they got to like 10, they said, we got to stop doing this. And they bought a big piece of property and put it there, and they said, hey, let's make a movie.
Yeah,
and it was a preserve. It became a preserve long after the movie and after it got flooded out and all that.
Right. So they decided to make this film, and in making this film, so many people got injured. So many people like would get mauled during the production. People with cameras would get attacked, and like then they would just have to stop for the day and pick up, or like take a break for hours while somebody was tended to, and then
Or
they would
take a temporary break while that guy gets taken away to the hospital, and they get right back to shooting.
right.
So you know what? They should have called this movie Maul instead of Roar.
They called it the most dangerous film ever made.
Yeah, and it really was. I can't think of anything else that would be more dangerous.
Right. No animals were hurt during the production. 115 people were injured.
And nobody tried to shut you down?
No. It was long before all the animal control.
And you were also on, it was private property essentially that and too. So, it makes it a little harder.
There were 115 lions and tigers and leopards and cheetahs. There were 2 elephants, 15 emu, bunch of vultures. It was.
You're a brave man. You're a brave man. I couldn't do that.
I was the production coordinator, so I just had to get everything. I had to not only deal with the all the needs of a movie production. I had to deal with all the needs of the ranch for all the animals. So I had to get the feed. I had to deal with their pets. I had to deal with all this other stuff. It's like a whole nother experience. It was crazy.
So if one of the animals attacked, were they like, you didn't feed them enough?
Nothing to do with me ever.
Okay. Okay, good. So let's jump back in then to how you met Dan. Then this was on the set of H2O, Halloween H2O, correct?
We didn't meet on the set. We met in pre-production.
Okay.
I got called to come in and actually was told by the head of production that I needed to meet with Dan. I don't know if you remember, Dan. We met at a restaurant nearby their offices and had some meeting first, talking about what we were.
Yep.
And then we went to this big production meeting.
Well, let's talk about what our exact jobs were on that movie, because that was a good time for your story. Let me set the stage. So before I started working there, Halloween 6 had been made. And Mustafa Akkad, who was the rights holder and made all the movies, and Bob Weinstein hated each other. And they were in active court litigation during the entire shooting of Halloween 6, fighting over creative control kinds of things.
And there's a famous story behind that with the producer's cut of Halloween 6.
You may know more about 6 than I do, because I came when it was done. But I didn't realize I was walking into this war that already existed. And there was incredible animosity between Bob Weinstein, I'm not going to say Dimension, because I didn't have any animosity. I didn't even know there was a fight. And the Mustafa Akkad people, because Bob had a habit of taking over and making a lot of creative decisions that in this project, he really didn't have the legal right to be making these decisions. So my biggest role on this, my job was executive in charge of production, which means I'm the project manager for the studio. I'm not the producer, but I'm there making sure the interests of Dimension Films and the budget is adhered to. And a lot of what I did at the beginning was make friends with the Mustafa Akkad group, because Mustafa was a gentle, older Muslim man who was very kind and was easy to get along with. So I did a lot of ambassadorial things. And this one had no legal problems because I ran interference on it. But one of the legal requirements was nobody from Miramax was a producer, and we did not have the right to put a producer on the movie. But what the head of production realized is we had the right to put a Bond company rep on the movie. That's where Pat comes into the story. You want to pick it up from here?
Yeah, he calls me and says, we can't really have a studio rep on the film. So what we have to do is we're going to tell them you're the completion bond rep. And so he said, we're going to have them pay you, just so there's no paper trail. We'll pay the bond company, but they'll pay you. And we even met at the bond company. There was no bond at all. It was just it
was completely made up, this whole thing.
And I had an office. They gave me an office at what's the name of the place that in West LA?
Lantana.
We were in Lantana. And so I asked them for an office, and they gave me one way far away from where they were in production. So I would have to always walked down to their offices. They did not want me around at all. They did not like me. They did not like the idea that they had a and they knew it was bullshit. They totally knew it was bullshit, but that just irritated them even more. They would lie to me about everything. The accountant, I asked the accountant. I said, "So can you give me information on how things are going with the, are we locking the budget? Are we getting it down?" She goes, "Look, I'm not going to tell you anything. I can't. It's too political for me. I can't even deal with it, and I'm already have a stressful job. I don't even want to talk about it. So don't ask me anything."
Wow.
She's a great accountant too. But there was a bit. The war was that studio wanted the movie to be made for $12 million, and the budget was 14 and change. And the head of production had asked me, "You got to find out where all the money is and why they can't get it down." And our first day, this first meeting with Dan and me and the producers and the director and the production manager, Dan and I, we didn't know these guys. I think you'd already met Mustafa, but the rest of them were sitting in this office, and the head of production says, "Well, guys, we want you to get, we're at an odds on the budget," and they said, "Yeah, we're trying. We'll try to get it down." And they looked at the production manager and they said, "Well, he's great. He'll get it down. He's fantastic." And the head of production goes, "I don't think so. I don't think that guy's very good." He goes, "He's your guy. He's going to do whatever you want him to do, and you guys don't really care. You're all disingenuous." And Dan and I were like, we didn't know these guys. It's our first meeting. It was very uncomfortable, and it stayed that was the kind of the studio filmmaker attitude the whole movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you stuck with it, so bravo.
They did make it for the higher budget. They got away with that.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is still a pretty good deal.
Oh yeah, for the Halloween franchise for sure.
Now let me ask you. I had heard a story that they didn't want LL Cool J in the film.
I don't think that's true.
No.
I never heard that. Look, Bob had decided we're going to put a rapper in every movie, which turned out to be a good idea. And look, LL Cool J was big at the time.
Yeah.
So no, I think we wanted him and he wanted to do it, and he was the nicest guy. Like, I can't say enough, because I dealt with a lot of rappers after that, and they were not all as nice as him, but he was terrific.
Yeah, he was great. He was nice.
And he's somebody that continues to work to this day. I mean, very solid career throughout, and a very, very solid career now on television, which is really good. I think he probably paved the way for Ice-T and probably Ice Cube, for that matter.
What if you remember the next movie? It was Busta Rhymes.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And then the next one I did was Usher.
Okay. Yeah, Usher.
I'm not going to say anything about.
Right. I've already heard some stories, so I
He was not the nicest man. That's all I'll say.
That's the stories I've heard too. But Busta, he went on, I think, to be in Shaft. Either that was before or after. I think that was after he went to Shaft.
Yeah, that was after.
I'm not sure. Good question.
Yeah, I think it was after.
Yeah, but he seemed like a pretty fun guy in general, I would imagine.
He was fine, but he wasn't as nice as Todd was. LL Cool J's real name is Todd. That's
Todd Smith. Todd Smith. Yeah.
The most regular name you'll ever hear.
Jason
his
Todd
Smith. His brand of family man and been with his wife forever, totally true.
Nice.
He's from Queens. He's from Queens,
Yep, exactly.
So you did this film, and did you guys immediately work together on another film after this, or was there some time in between?
Well, I don't know if it was immediate. I mean, what happened with that was Dan was employed by Miramax, and so the head of production wanted to keep me working, so he would say, help with this project. So I remember you were doing Dusk Till Dawn or sequels, I think, maybe?
The prequels.
The prequels. So there was a couple things that they were investigating shooting, and so they'd have me budget out the potential additional photography or things like that, just different things. So we worked on that, and then we eventually worked on this together.
On Highlander, yeah.
With this,
They were all adventures because Dusk Till Dawn. Again,
behind that, wasn't it?
I went to South Africa the second day I worked there. I walked into the office, they handed me a plane ticket, go to South Africa. They never said to do what. I had no idea. I hadn't worked there, I didn't know anybody, and I find myself on a 20-hour flight to Cape Town, and I still didn't know what I was there to do. And I hadn't worked in a studio before, so I didn't even know what the job really entailed. I learned very quickly, and there was a counterpart for Pat that they'd sent to South Africa to fix that movie named Russ Markowitz. So I made close friends with Russ and did many movies with him around the world. But those were the ones I learned on.
Okay. All right.
Dan, didn't we do this right after H2O?
Yeah, I just did the Dusk Till Dawn's very first. And then we did, God, I can't remember which came first. Was it Highlander?
No. H2O was first. And then this.
Yeah, I was only in South Africa for a couple of weeks, so I came back and immediately did H2O. I think is how it worked.
Yeah,
and that was shot in L.A.
Yeah, because
H2O was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that estate, where the school was?
Wasn't it a Catholic school or a monastery type thing? Weren't nuns there? There were nuns.
Yeah,
there.
I have this vague feeling, and I could be wrong, that it wasn't Taylor Swift. Somebody big bought that as their house. And it was a big deal about nuns selling it. It wasn't Katy Perry, I think, lives in that monastery.
Wow.
It was nice. It was nice. It was very different. Yeah.
It was right in town. It was near like Griffith Park area, wasn't it? Can't even remember anymore. Yeah.
So Christopher Lambert, Adrian Paul.
Oh yes.
You want to go right to Highlander Endgame.
Which one was the best? I have to. I've been chomping at the bit to get to this.
See, you're worried about 45 minutes. I'm worried we can't tell the stories we want to tell in 45 minutes. There's some great Halloween stories, but we can switch to Highlander.
All right. Well, let's go back to Halloween then. We're still on H2O. Tell us a little more.
Well, what's noteworthy about the cast? Bob Weinstein was really good at casting, and he had just done Scream, where everybody in the cast became a star. So he was on a roll. And you could see the people behind Kevin there. Michelle Williams was nobody. She'd done Dawson's Creek, and that's it. Josh Hartnett was nobody. And I remember him and his mother. Yeah, and he lived in Iowa, and his mother and he rented a U-Haul truck and drove to LA, and I helped them unload the U-Haul truck. And he was a great guy. And I'm trying to remember who else was in it. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is the celebrity kill. See, because of Scream, where Drew Barrymore was the celebrity kill in the first 5 minutes, Bob decided, we're going to do this more, which was a good idea. So Joseph Gordon-Levitt was just on the sci-fi show. What was that called? Third something from the sun?
Third from the sun?
Yeah.
I keep mixing it up with 30 Rock. And so he was somebody, but he wasn't big or anything. And we got him with the hockey skate in the forehead. That's how he dies.
Yeah.
And he was very pleasant to deal with. Jamie Lee Curtis, this was the first one she'd done in decades.
Yeah.
Right.
And
This is part 2.
she was really great to deal with. And I had a 3-year-old, and she would get on the floor and play with my 3-year-old.
Oh.
My best little tidbit about Michelle Williams and Jamie Lee Curtis is they got the cover of Entertainment Weekly for this movie. And it was a picture of Michelle Williams in a bathtub full of blood. And Jamie Lee Curtis is standing behind her. And if you look closely, there is fully exposed nipple of Michelle Williams on the cover of Entertainment Weekly. And nobody seemed to have noticed this because it got printed.
Wow.
I think the second printing, they noticed it, but I pick it up and I'm like, she's completely topless in this shot. And I think they thought the blood covered it, but it didn't. And
Oops.
I always thought that was funny.
If it was a European edition, it would have been fine. They wouldn't care. But America, it's a big deal.
Exactly. And this was 20 years ago, so it was a bigger deal.
Yeah.
And what about Jodie Lynn O'Keefe?
I think she was like, we found her in open casting and she went on to do things. Everybody, an awful lot of people, Adam Hamburg, I put it up the list. Janet Leigh, that's where, of Psycho, we made sure, who was Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. We actually did a scene with the real car from Psycho, just because we thought it would be a goof.
Right.
Adam Arkin, obviously, is the love interest and very solid actor.
He was great. He was funny.
Nancy Stevens.
Yep, exactly. In fact, we wrote the role for Janet Leigh in the middle. We said to Jamie Lee, "You think your mother would want to do something?" And she's like, "She'd love to do something." So we wrote a scene just to put her in it to get and we found the car somewhere. I don't know, Pat, you remember where that came from?
No, I just remember I think the prop master or picture car wrangler, one of the two of them figured it out, said it's available. So they just jumped on it.
Another good tidbit is Kevin Williamson did an uncredited total dialogue polish and wrote the dialogue that really got shot in this movie. And I think he ended up with an executive producer credit because there was some guild reason he couldn't get writer credit. But he really made it a lot better in the last 3 weeks before we shot.
That's good. That's good. How long did the production last? Like the actual shooting schedule was like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks?
Feels like it was 25 days, Dan. That's what I think I remember.
That's short? Yeah, it wasn't a long shoot.
It was
about right.
Days,
5-day week.
But in that 25-day week schedule was a very unique 5-day reshoot that involved the mask.
Good segue, Pat. Thanks for sending me the softball. So I sent some pictures that you guys are going to edit in. Okay. So the way the mask, first of all, every Halloween movie has a different mask. They never keep them. It's really just disorganization. So this one they had to make a mask. So the director, Steve Miner, went himself and got this mask made, which is the first one you'll show the picture of. And it's very white and it's got small eye openings. And it didn't look quite like the Halloween mask, but we shot a week and Bob Weinstein sees the dailies and he goes berserk.
7
days like, this
later.
looks terrible.
Yeah.
And who the hell is this director to think he could remake the franchise and this and that? Now, it's worth noting the first movie had an off-the-rack William Shatner mask. So they were far from what the real mask was. But Bob was right, by the way. So it turned out Steve Miner's college roommate was Stan Winston. So Steve, of course, not taking responsibility, said, well, the problem is you only gave me $900 for a mask, and we need Stan Winston to make one, which is what happened. And Stan Winston's was $12,000 with real hair, but it was better. Now, the other picture I sent you, which you should put up, is the box cover, because the famous shot of Michael looking through that round window at Jamie was shot with the old mask. And you can clearly see it's the old mask. And that, I guess, I didn't realize this until I went and looked for you guys, that they'd done all the press pictures in the first week. Then we switched the mask, which I sent you a picture of the real mask, and you'll see it's much different. It's a lot more detail. It's darker. The eye openings are twice as big. So awesome. I think it was 25 days plus some reshoot days.
Right? Well, it was in the schedule. The interesting thing about that was we had to adjust for it and fit those days into the schedule. And I remember the amount of money it was going to be to do that was around $850,000, and the head of production was pushing and saying they can do it for less, and they had me analyze the schedule, and I said, yeah, they could do this in 3 days if they really wanted to. And he came to the set, and we were at the monastery, went out on this nice big front lawn. He calls him over. And we're standing there talking to him, and he goes to the director. He says, "So, Steve, I mean, we want you to do this for less days than what you have, what you're telling us you can do it in. I really would appreciate it if you could do that." And he goes, "Well, I'm really trying. I've done everything I can. I just don't know how to do it." And he looked. This head of production he's got giant balls, and he just stares at him. And he goes, "I think you're totally disingenuous. You don't give a shit, do you?" And
Which was true, by the way.
Steve Miner just looked at him. He goes, "Come on, Kevin, what are you talking about?" He goes, "No, you can say whatever you want. If you wanted to do it in 3 days and wanted to work with us, you would. But I don't think you care. So you don't give a shit, do you?" And he said, "All right, thanks." And that was the end of the conversation. And we ended up shooting it, taking 5 days in the schedule to do this. Reshoot all the scenes where Michael Myers appeared. And it was like, he'd come in this doorway here, walk over here, and
so the sets were all gone. I mean, it was a big,
oh man,
big Michigas, but worth it. It was worth it ultimately.
Okay, yeah. So it looked much better, and
it really did.
Whatever happened, it made Bob happy. That was the most important thing.
That's good. Well, did they choose Steve Miner to direct because he directed Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3 back in the 80s? Is that one reason, because he has experience with these type of movies?
Well,
I think so. I mean, he was good at creating suspense. He was not. He was a bit of a lazy director, but he definitely understood how to create suspense.
Well, his when we got him, he had been doing the Wonder Years and all these other. He'd been doing television. He was rooted heavily in television for several years prior. So to do the movie, was like his first movie in many, many years.
Did he oftentimes argue that Michael Myers should have an inner monologue that's spoken out loud during the shoot?
I do not remember that. I don't think he cared enough to argue about anything.
Are you just saying that as a joke? Because it's funny.
Yeah.
Because
Wonder Years,
Miramax treated him. They gave him a really sweet deal. They paid him a lot of money to direct the movie, and then they gave him another movie. They had to pay him the same amount.
No, they gave him a 2-picture deal. This was the first. So and the second one was for many, many millions of dollars.
Lake Placid.
And then we didn't do. Well, no, he got Lake Placid, not related to Dimension, the moment the movie finished.
I thought that was the next movie.
It was his next movie, but it wasn't for us.
Oh, it wasn't the second. I know what you're saying. You're saying Texas.
He was put on Texas Rangers,
right?
Which was the biggest money loser Dimension ever made, and I also did that one. But Steve didn't care about It was a Western, and he wasn't good at Westerns. He didn't care about Westerns, but it was pay him his money to not direct or pay him to direct this movie. So they kind of made him do it.
Didn't you tell me that Jamie Lee Curtis had something to do with his deal?
I cannot remember.
Do it unless he did it, something to that effect.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't remember. Maybe he was a friend of Jamie's. That could have been.
But he was so weak when he did Texas Rangers. Dad, tell him he would go off fly fishing and never show up after lunch.
Wow.
We had to build a big Western town. He would pick locations near fishing places so he could go fish.
Oh.
And we built a big Western town, but they were facades. And they were supposed to go back far enough that from an angle, it looked like there was a build, just the last thing in a row. And they didn't do it. So we show up and the sets are only like 18 inches deep. And from almost every angle, you could tell you couldn't even shoot on them. And the main producer of the thing at the time said to me, "I'll bet when we bring Steve out here to inspect, he won't even notice." I said to him, "How can he not notice? Like, I could bring my 6-year-old, they would notice." Steve didn't notice. So he's like, "It's great. It's great. No problem."
Back out to the river.
Right.
Right. It headed to fish. It was. That's a whole other podcast if you want Texas Ranger story.
Yes.
Here's the last thing I'll say about Halloween, and then we can switch to the other one, is we mixed the movie at Skywalker, the George Lucas, unbelievable. And so you go there and you stay for 2 weeks in their condos, and everybody that works there has an Academy Award nomination. It's really the best place by leaps and bounds. And we had hired John Ottman, who was pretty up and coming but substantial composer at the time.
No,
And I just
Ottman.
he
did The Usual Suspects.
and he
Okay.
did both X-Men movies and Valkyrie. Like, he was a big deal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he does the score, and we listen to it for it's late being delivered the day before we start mixing. We listen to it, and Bob Weinstein's like, I hate this. Throw it out. Throw it in the garbage. I hate every note. He had done the main theme of Halloween that John Carpenter wrote. They kept his riff on that, but that's the only thing. So they then hire this guy who had done almost nothing, named Marco Beltrami, who is now a big-time composer. And the guy was like a genius. So we would be in one room and he would be writing the music an hour before it had to be mixed into the movie every single day. That's how it came together. But he was so talented, it came out great. And again, Bob was probably right on this one, that the music and the mask weren't good enough. And
but you know, there was you had a great DP, Darren Okada. I loved him. I remember him working with him earlier in his career. He was really, really, he was a great DP. I don't know what happened to him.
You know, now that you mentioned Lake Placid, that makes sense, because that would make sense. That's what he would go to direct next after this, because there's a giant lake to fish at. You know,
I hadn't even thought. Look, Steve could do horror in his sleep. When it came to anything else, not so much.
Yeah.
You know who else? Dan was on that. Patrick Lussier. He edited it. He was the editor. So. And
Patrick Lussier was Wes Craven's protege.
Right.
And then he worked for do some work on like a Saw movie or something like that. That even sounds very familiar.
Yeah, Patrick went on to direct for Miramax, didn't he? Dan, didn't he direct?
Well, he edited all the Scream movies. Was it for Miramax? He went on to direct. Yeah, I can't remember if it was for Dimension or not. But very talented guy. Really, really good editor. Suspense editor.
Nice. So let's get into it. Adrian Paul or Christopher Lambert? Come on, guys. You got to choose one, because there can only be one. So you get to choose one.
Christopher Lambert, hands down.
Yeah? Okay.
Definitely.
I'll tell you what.
Adrian Paul was a pain in the butt. That's all I'm going to say.
His ego was so giant. He believed that he was the shit. And he was around Christoph. He definitely was intimidated, because Christoph is the Highlander. And he really couldn't deal with it. And so he made everything about him so much bigger. You know, he got in fights with people on the set, other cast members. And they weren't all, some of them were legitimate fights, because one of the guys that he got in a fight with was a total idiot, and he deserved it. But I had to get the Romanian press that was doing a behind the scenes thing. They filmed him and getting upset, and I had to get the tape from the guy so he would not show it, because we wanted to protect, you know, Adrian, because Adrian said, you got to get the tape. You have to get the tape. He was such a lunatic. His agent, you knew, Dan, right? I think
you remember better than I do, did I? Who was his agent?
His agent knew that he had this a hard guy to deal with. That movie has so much stuff going on about it. Dan just heard from Bruce Payne, who played the antagonist in it, and the story of that guy is hilarious. I mean, to me, it's hilarious, because he got a cold, he got bronchitis, and shut down the production. We had to call force majeure, because we shot everything on the day he was starting all of his stuff, all of his big scenes. Mm-hmm. He got this he got a cold, and he said, I can't work. So we told him, okay, go back to your room. And then he proceeded to say he couldn't work anymore, and he did not work anymore until we shut down the film. Right around Christmas, and we had to come back and shoot, and he wouldn't go back to Romania. He would only shoot in London, where he's from. So he refused to go back to Romania, and he
many $1 million insurance claim.
It was $3.5 million insurance claim, that's
many.
The film was only a $17 million movie, so that's a big. But he was a lunatic, and I accidentally gave the insurance company. I gave him a number that was his general number. I thought it turned out to be his private number, and he said I was in cahoots with the insurance companies, never wanted to see me again, wouldn't talk to me. He talks to Dad still. He still talks to Dad. I don't know how much work that guy gets, but and there was
he works. He's producing more, but he works. He called. I haven't talked to him in 20 years. He called me up a week ago out of the blue.
But it was the director of that was this guy Doug Arniakowski, and Doug was a first AD that had been working for Miramax, and he had been working on. He was Quentin's and Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah, he was an FOQ, a friend of Quentin.
Yeah, so he was doing all this stuff, and he got to go out. He even got to go out and direct second unit on Texas Rangers. That Dan was on. Did you get him that, Dan? In Texas Rangers.
Did I get a credit or did I?
Did you get him the job?
No, but it was Quentin.
Okay, so by the time we're doing Highlander, Dan recommends this guy to direct the movie.
No, that is not true either. Quentin just said, you will hire this guy to make this movie. Okay. And he called up Bob and just ordered him. And Quentin got what Quentin got because he made the best movies and they wanted him to be happy.
This guy's a lucky man. He's had the honor of being assistant director on a lot of famous movies. He was on Austin Powers. He was the first assistant director on that one. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
His wife was the producer of Austin Powers, and Suzanne Todd. And she
famous producer.
They had just had a baby, and when I met him at Earth Cafe on Melrose, we were talking about it, and I said, "Well, this is exciting, but we only have like 10 weeks from now that we're going to shoot. That's cast issues, so we got to get on the plane and take off right away. You got to go, and then you got to come back because there's casting in LA you're going to have to deal with, and there's some fight guys you have to audition, all this stuff." He goes, "Okay, that'd be great. I'm going on a vacation to Hawaii tomorrow." And I said, "What? How can you go on a vacation to Hawaii?" He goes, "It's planned. It's my wife. I can't get out of it." So after that meeting, I told the head of production, and he called him up and said, "Doug, it's either the movie or your vacation. Pick one." He goes, "I'm definitely doing the movie." And then he went on vacation. So he went right on vacation. He didn't give a fuck. And that started everything going downhill for him because he was behind in prep, and he was an interesting guy. He was very kind of stoic, big, tall, good-looking Swede with long hair and sunglasses and a baseball cap all the time. And he got so far behind schedule. I sent him when he was on his vacation a calendar showing everything he had to do from that day going forward. And I faxed it to his hotel. So I'm sure that when his wife, who was a big producer, who just done Austin Powers 1 and 2, she saw that, she probably said, "Fuck this guy," which is what happened. Because if he'd looked at it, he'd have realized I wasn't blowing smoke up his ass. It was true stuff I was telling him he had to deal with, and it was a tight schedule. And it probably scared the shit out of him, but she probably had to tell him. And then by the time he gets back, he was always going back and forth with what he wanted, and he always wanted bigger things. He wanted a big village, us to go up in this big remote area and build this village, and to go out on a remote location and bring everything out there to build, and it was going to cost us way too much money. So I convinced him to shoot it on the lot at our studio, and I gave him another day, and he loved that. That made him happy, and he agreed to it. But then after that, he was complaining about the set the entire time. And they brought in a guy. He started to get really belligerent, and his wife showed up. His wife was. I believe his wife was telling him how to behave as a director because he'd been an AD, and she told him, "Don't talk to me ever. I have no control of the movie." Is what she told him. And don't listen to him. He has no creative say in anything. And he started saying shit about me to come to the set, or he's going to punch me and things like that. And he pissed off the head of production from day one, and he called him and said he wanted to get me fired. and wow.
Wow.
And the head of production said, "What do you know? This guy's doing what he does on every movie. You're just not agreeing to work with him." And he went around him and called the president of the company, Cary Grant, and said the same thing. And when head of production heard he called the president, he totally flipped and said, "This guy's never working for us again." And then he called a friend of mine who's a completion bond rep now, has his own completion bond company. He had called him to replace me because he was a line producer back in the time. And he was actually really trying to do it. And it was seriously just because I was trying to get him to make decisions, and he didn't want to make the decisions. And he just, by the time it was over, he'd alienated everyone. No one liked him. We had to bring in that first AD who was, because his first AD had been his second AD, and the belief was that guy was not effective for him because he was intimidated by trying to do everything he wanted him to do. So they brought in this guy, Brian Cook, who'd been the first AD.
Stanley's first AD. Stanley Kubrick's guy.
Ooh.
Michael.
Okay.
Michael,
you bring the big
was
guns
hardcore ball buster.
Yeah.
50 years in the business, worked on Star Wars, worked on every Kubrick movie, and he took over.
You bring the big guns in now.
So he was also Sean Penn's AD, so he had dealt with difficult directors. And he came in, and he was hilarious. The first thing he shows me is a call sheet signed by Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, and Stanley Kubrick for day 365 of Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut,
And he shows up and he goes, "Let me see the schedule. Let me see all this stuff." And he pulls out his old school board, and he stripped out the show old school style with long cardboard strips into the big production board, because it wasn't long before computers. That's how they did it. This big, huge, spread out board, and with every scene. And he strips out the board and says, "I've solved the schedule. Let's go to the pub." He was a drunk. He just constantly wanted to go drunk. He was hilarious. And we'd gotten his best friend on the movie as Doug's DP, a guy named Doug Milsom. And Doug Milsom had shot Last of the Mohicans, Full Metal Jacket, and he was really good buddies with this guy. And the two of them would just go get bombed every time they went out to dinner. It was like, oh my God, I pulled that guy out of the pub so many times it was ridiculous.
No, out of the casino. He was about to get beaten up by Marines because he was drunk and belligerent. And Pat saves his life by dragging him out of the casino before they could punch him.
He looked at some guy that he didn't even know at the bar, and all these other guys, effects guys and stunt guys and other camera guys, are all over in the corner. They all know him. They call him Cookie. And he was looking at some guy at the bar. He goes, "You're nothing but," he said something, you're nothing like but a gigolo. And he goes, "And every girl here's a prostitute. They don't give a fuck about you. Just pay them and get out of the bar." I had to drag him out, right? He was going to get punched because the guy looked at him like, "I'm going to kill you." But he's a big guy too. He just, so it was a wild story, but that guy ended up intimidating Doug because Doug had been a PA, a production assistant for him on The Desperate Hours, which was a Michael Cimino film, and with Mickey Rourke. And so he knew him and was like, looked up to him as like, oh my God, he's the god of ADs. And that's why, and I had gotten Doug on the movie for Doug Arnikowski, because Doug Milsom had also shot Desperate Hours. So, you know, I put the team in place for him, and when they brought on Brian, it was like, it was a different story. And so his wife, Doug's wife, Suzanne Todd, all she did was kiss up to Brian. Like he was so glad you're here, Brian. She didn't give a fuck about the fact that he was usurping the first AD, who is still the first AD, Brian, who's now still a big time working AD, still does Quentin's movies, he still does Robert Rodriguez. But when Cook came in, he kind of just took over that kid. And just
sat Doug down and he said, "Doug," I can't do the accent, "Doug, you're a stupid cunt." And that fixed the movie from that moment on. And Doug never said a word. Pat, you can say it in the accent.
It was very, very funny. Yeah, Doug. What Brian Cook said to me the last time I talked to him, he directed a movie about some a guy going all over London. It's a true story. He went all over London saying he was Stanley Kubrick, but he wasn't. And he made this movie called Color Me Kubrick with John Malkovich. And he told me he was getting ready to make it. I go, that's fantastic, Brian. Listen, I'm available if you want me to come and produce it for you. And he goes, oh, Pat, no. It's not shitty enough for you. He called it the day that Bruce Payne said he was too sick to work was this big graveyard fight scene between Christophe Lambert and Adrian and Bruce Payne. And before I got the word that Bruce Payne couldn't work, I got a call from my production manager who says, he's laughing, but he's appalled. He's going, you got to get down here. Brian's here, and he's calling everyone a cunt, and he's and fighting, and he's drunk out of his mind. It was a day after Thanksgiving, and we had a big party, and he came so wasted. And I took him and drove him around and took him to get coffee. I said, we got to go talk. Yeah. Let's go to some coffee. And by the time I get him the coffee, he goes, I see. You sobering me up, aren't you? I said, yes.
Brian's rule is if you drink it at 8 a.m., but it's in a coffee cup, it isn't booze.
Oh, I did not know that. That's good to know. Future knowledge here.
Dan did all these great things in post. What they ended up doing in post is Miramax would do all these cool things where they would market and reshoot things that are going to be just in the trailer and not in the movie. Mm-hmm. And got to go and do a whole another shoot with Doug in Liechtenstein.
Oh, that's cool.
They shot a whole bunch.
That became my secret job, where they wouldn't have the trailer shots of lots of movies. And they would have me go shoot 5 big eye candy shots. Yeah. And there's a shot in Stargate where James Spader steps through the thing that looks like aluminum foil. It's a big circle. He time travels. It was Bob's favorite shot. So he wanted some version of that shot. Even the one in Halloween where the face is in that round thing came from the shot in Stargate, because that's what we were aiming for. I kept saying to him, shoot him before and put him in the real movie. And he had no interest in it.
Yes. I've always noticed that when I would go see a movie, I'd be like, oh, that was in the trailer, but it wasn't in the film. So that makes sense.
Yep.
I got a quick question for you. At what point did Highlander Endgame run out of money for the budget?
Oh, it didn't.
It did, because
didn't?
Here's my one thing, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention this. My buddy Brock would just run me over the coals for not mentioning this, but at one point in this film, they reshowed the same fight sequence. Was that... I always thought that's because they ran out of money, but they didn't.
Remember, it was a studio that was owned by Disney. There was unlimited money. So they never ran out of money.
No, and
if they put that scene twice, it was an editorial, maybe bad decision, but it wasn't because they ran out of money.
Okay. All right. I've always wondered. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Do you know where it was? Do you know which part of which fight that is?
It was where they were fighting around these huge cement columns.
That's on the.
Was it the Donnie Yen fight?
No. That's Donnie Yen's fight is in the apartment. No.
Yeah.
No. The fight on the columns, I think is that at the end? Is that the finale?
I don't remember if it was the finale. This is me. This is 20 years ago. Me.
Ali, and I think I know what you're talking about. I think you're correct. I think you are correct. And okay. No, they had. Listen, the insurance claim itself paid. Was a windfall. That movie did not run out of money. It was actually, the head of production told me, I said so, because they didn't want to spend what we ended up spending on it originally. Mm-hmm. Said, how do you justify what we spent on the movie to Bob? He goes, well, I do all this creative accounting, because he used to be an accountant. He said, what I do is I take all the costs that we won't have. I said, like what? He goes, there will be no residuals, so I can deduct $2 million for that, because we shot out of the country. He goes, and there was no interest basically. So I can deduct that. So he would deduct all this stuff, and he said, and so I got down to the number he wanted. I said, how do you do that? He goes, well, he doesn't care. He just wants me to tell him that the number's right. So
Nice. That's creative.
one other really cool story is that we, going along with what Dan said about how Weinstein Bob wanted to put rappers in every movie. In this movie, he wanted Jay-Z.
Oh, okay.
Which we did not get, but he wanted to.
No.
He was not available. So he was not available. So they offered up his partner, who was not a rapper, who was the business side, was a guy named Damon Dash.
Yeah, Damon Dash, who's the cousin of Stacey Dash.
Right. So we got.
And he ran Rockefeller, the wardrobe, the clothing company.
Record too.
That's right.
They were part of Rockefeller Records, and then they did Rockefeller Clothing, and he came out to us, and he was something else. He stepped in.
I enjoyed David Dash.
I did too. He brought so much attitude and so much swag. It was ridiculous. He gave me one of his Rockefeller suits, and I'm a little guy. I mean, I'm 5'6", but he gave me something that must have fit someone that was like 3 times my weight and height. And I was swimming in the thing, and I was an idiot. I said, I want you to give this to someone who's going to use it. I can't use this. I should have just kept it, but I gave it back to him. But Damon was like, oh, he was all over that country, and he was running it. He was something else. We killed him off pretty early in the movie, but
he gets beheaded.
Yeah, he gets beheaded. He's a character. He was a real character.
If you'd have kept that suit, maybe he was trying to hint that you could have been the next David Byrne. You know,
right.
Possible. You could have had a whole nother career, but you just gave it away.
Another interesting people should look for in that movie is there's a scene in the original Highlander movie that they shot in Lower Manhattan, and it is of Christopher Lambert walking up the block where he lives. And we wanted to we actually on a set built that block of Manhattan that matches perfectly. We had a production designer who's a buddy of ours, Jonathan Carlson, and you cannot tell the difference if you compare the two of them.
We built it on a street in Bucharest, and we blew up the whole thing. It was really cool. It was really cool. And then we rebuilt the apartment inside.
That matches perfectly.
But it was a very strange place we built it in. Ceausescu had built all these buildings in Bucharest, and when he went out of power, they just were stagnant, and half of them were unfinished. And we found one, what was it called, the radio building or something like that?
This was like a half-mile square monolith that they never finished the inside of. It was like an open construction site on the inside.
Yeah, it was a cement and rebar and gravel. It was, we shot a lot in there. And one place we built the whole apartment interior in there. And it's
really cool. Pre-built sound stages.
Yeah, well, they had
But there were like pits you could fall into. And there were packs of wild dogs that would roam the streets of Bucharest. Like this was only a couple years after the Iron Curtain fell. And it was still not cool. And I bet it's still that way. And I looked at the guidebook, and it said, countries that have packs of wild dogs are indicative of dictators who have killed people, because when they kill the men, the dogs, they kill the families, and the dogs are set free. And that's what it showed. And they were totally there. Crazy. There were people living in this building, like homeless people. It was really unsafe and cold, but it was a great looking place to shoot a movie.
Well, the real Transylvania is right there.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you have to drive about 2 hours.
Gentlemen, this has been fantastic. Before we have to wrap this up, though, I just want to, if you guys want to throw anything else out there, if you have anything else you want to say, please feel free. Kevin, if you had another quick question to ask, please feel free to do.
I feel we got to bring these guys back for a part 2. There's so much stuff we never even got to.
There's a lot between the two of these guys, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm about to go to Thailand to shoot 2 kung fu movies, and if you want to do one in the middle of them, I'll do it from Thailand and tell you how they're going.
That'll be cool.
Thank you, sir.
Look forward
Pat,
to
Pat, you started your career during the second golden age of Hollywood. When you said 1976, I said, "Oh my goodness, that triggered a memory right there about what the time you started the business, and that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Bill and Ted.
I worked on Bill and Ted's. I was on the lighting crew.
There we go. See?
Yeah. Yeah. We're definitely going to have these guys back. Dan, Pat, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
Really enjoyed it.
For those of you that don't know, we do these gold standard interviews every once in a while. And we do put these up on YouTube. We have a whole bunch of videos from our past catalog on there. We do also do an audio podcast. It comes out usually every Thursday or Friday. For the Real Short Box, you can find us on all the podcast platforms, all the major ones. We do a live podcast, usually on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, that you can tune into. We do all kinds of fun things there as well. So again, thank you all for tuning in. And thanks again to Dan and Pat. And of course, Kevin, as always. And if we don't,
We should do like a Hollywood Squares kind of thing.
But thanks again. And if we don't see you guys out and about anytime soon, perhaps we'll see you
at the adventurous, bewildering, but there can only be one comic book shop.
Well,
Let's do it like Siskel and Ebert. We'll see you at the movies.